How should employers manage staff perceptions about their own risk? From an organisational perspective, John Boardman, can you share your insights into this?
Once again, perceptions are built on information that people have, be it good information or not. So education, training, and information are going to be critical, and those consultative processes. The work health safety legislation provides a framework for most work environments, and as we've said there before, there is damage that can happen to people, not only in a physical sense, but also psychological injury. So those perceptions can be as dangerous as some of the other physical aspects of getting ill. And people in the workplace, their mental health is really important. And then, of course, employers can be liable for psychological injuries. So in terms of managing those perceptions, it's about not being alarmist, about calming people, about giving them information and reassurance, being consistent in the message, not running around criticising political figures, not running around trying to, belittle the union or the union delegates or whatever it is, but sort of working cooperatively together will make a big difference. And of course, the thing that we need to understand is that there will be a lot of non-compliance. So I think a view that everybody, mandatory means every single person is vaccinated is probably unrealistic. The other thing is, I might say, if you're in an production environment or something like that, and you were to lose 10 or 15% of your staff because they refuse to be vaccinated and they're skilled workers, how do you run the business? How do you stock the supermarket shelves? In New South Wales, I think even at present, they said 20% of healthcare workers are not vaccinated. Now, healthcare workers have been able to get vaccination since April, and yet there's still 20%. Now, if some of those are doctors and nurses and other, medical technicians, you just can't pull them out of the air. And with the number of people that might be in mandatory isolation, how do you keep a business going? So we have to learn to live with this perception that people have that they might be unsafe one way or the other. It's a tension, it's a conflict, and some people will be there. It's about how we deal with that. And my view is having those processes in place where people can talk about their concerns, be counselled, have access to EAP, to be able to work out, and there might be reasonable adjustment. So that person might be moved to a different part of the production line because they don't want to be close to a particular group of people or a particular person. Now, they may want to work from home where that's available. So once again, as occurs with a lot of other matters, the employer may be required to demonstrate that they've taken reasonable steps to not only protect people, but also to address their concerns.
Can I just also add, Inga, how important it will be to reinduct staff going forward in relation to practices and expectations in the workplace. And those expectations may even differ going forward than what they were 12 months ago because the landscape has changed. Since, in particular, you will have governments less likely to lock down when there are surges in cases. And therefore, self-management and taking responsibility for your team members and your fellow team members and peers will be exceptionally important. And organisations will need to emphasise this. in their reinduction of employees.
Thank you, Stephen. And staying with you, around the question of employers managing staff perceptions about their own risk, from a culture perspective, what can you recommend that managers can do to influence this positively?
Oh, look, I think it goes back to objectivity and demonstrating responsibility and what responsibility looks like. And as Boardman was saying before, being consistent is going to be exceptionally important. But it's about what are we going to be consistent about going forward? What do we need to say to people about if you're not feeling well? What do we need to be saying to people about if one of the team members experiences COVID? What do we need to be saying to team members about work flexibility? And what are there going to be the consistencies and inconsistencies around that? So John also made an exceptionally important point, which is that as leaders, we can't be seen to panic, and we can't be seen to espousing some political view or anti-government view, anti-opposition view, anti-union view, whatever our thoughts are, because workplaces are a place that people with all beliefs and views should be able to come and feel safe. And if their leader is taking strong positions on particular matters, that's a very dangerous game to play in the current situation.
Stephen, if I might just say, that goes to the heart of what organisations put in place to drive their whole organisation, and that's their values. So if you've got a respect value where you respect a person, right, front and centre, if for whatever reason they're fearful, then the way in which we treat that and their feelings with respect will drive all of those other things, the policies, the procedures, whether we grant leave or don't grant leave, whether we let them work from home or don't let them work from home. And you have a whole range, most organisations have their policies to test each of these issues against that. What sort of organisation do we want to be? You know, how do we want to be placed? Like, for example, when, you know, the practical application, I've got two applicants for a job. One's been vaccinated and the other hasn't. Do I make that a selection criteria? Is that unlawful? Well, at present, no, it's not, because it's not a defined attribute. However, what if the reason they haven't had that vaccination is because of a religious belief? Then it may be. But generally speaking, it's about how we treat people and how we deal with their concerns. There's plenty of people that have had concerns in the past that might be imagined. It might be not necessarily frivolous. It may be that because of their background, they may have been abused as a child. They may have been through abusive relationship. They might have had all sorts of, you know, they might have been a refugee and sort of lived through civil war. All of those sorts of things can impact on us and our perceptions of authority and trust and all those sorts of things. So we need to be mindful of those things. And even though the reaction might not be the standard or normal response, doesn't necessarily mean that there's not some validity to it and that they might not need special attention. I don't know your views on that, Stephen. You're probably far more qualified to speak on that than me.
Stephen Booker, around addressing those staff concerns around risk, what can you tell us about that?
Well, I think John's really hit the nail right on the head. And as has already been said, you know, perceptions of safety are just as important as the actual level of safety provided. And John and Costa and Steve have already emphasized the importance of good communication and consultation around what our safety and compliance procedures are. In terms of managing staff concerns, I think one important point is don't assume that everybody has the same concerns. Don't assume that everybody is going to react the same way. It's also really important that leaders don't try to dismiss or make light of the concerns. We should try to do the opposite, which is we should normalize the concerns. We should recognize that there are risks. We should be honest about the level of those risks and clear about what we're doing to mitigate them. In terms of the cultural points that Steve Bell's made, again, great points. And one of the things we talk about in our how to respond to mental ill health training at IHR is that effective leaders, acknowledge the stress and anxiety that both employees may be feeling, or some may be feeling, but also that they as a leader may be feeling. Good emotional intelligence is not about being a robot with no emotions and no concerns and no stress. It's about recognizing that at times we do have stress, but reassuring and affirming to our team, both through what we say, but through our actions, that we can get through this. This is not our first stressful situation. We've handled challenging things before. We have come through them, and we can do it again. So effective leaders acknowledge the stress, but they have confidence in their teams. Previous psychological research on how people experience return to work following major traumatic events shows, firstly, as you would expect, that people suffer a dip in often performance, engagement, communication, and morale. But secondly, that dip can be most effectively minimized where people are given the opportunity to mentally prepare for the return to work and what it's going to be like before they actually get back. Now, Steve Bell made the critical point about the importance of creating some reinduction processes. And I just want to expand on that because it's absolutely critical. So let's talk about what would that look like. Previously, it's been shown to be effective if you give employees a mental vision of what it's going to be like when they come back to work. So if you have the resources to do it, not every organization will, but it would be great to do maybe some video tours of walking around the office and showing employees this is what any physical infrastructure changes we have in the office might look like. Are we putting screens in place? Are we separating desks? Are we separating production lines? Or maybe before people actually start full or part-time back at work, we might bring them in for induction visits where they actually get to have a look at any compliance changes or physical infrastructure changes or even team changes that we're doing. So having some sort of formalized reintroduction to the workplace process, I think, is really important. It's also really important to not expect people to just snap back to pre-COVID normal in terms of working. I think, leaders need to huddle with their teams and spend some time acknowledging what a crazy, difficult period it has been and that we've been through. Focus on helping the team talk about, what our successes and challenges have been in the remote environment or partially remote environment, and what learnings we've had and how we can apply those to help this transition go as smoothly as possible going forward. The other thing I think that's really important is whenever people encounter anxiety or uncertainty, one thing that really helps them cope with that is stable, consistent routines. And so from a work point of view, it means that particularly when people first come back, I want to make sure everybody has a really clear idea of what their job is, what their objectives are, who their stakeholders are, how the work that they do contributes to their team's success, their functional area or department's success, and the whole company's success. It's easy to assume everybody knows that, but it's always a good idea to re-communicate it and confirm it. Finally, I just wanted to talk about what a good leadership mindset is for helping people cope with perceptions of risk. We've talked already that it really needs to be one about empathy, compassion, and caring for people. It needs to be one of regular checking in, both at a team and an individual level. And it needs to be one where we give people permission to speak up about concerns, making sure that we're not bottling things up, making sure that we're talking. We may have concerns and anxieties, but we have those together as a group.